Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and everything in between. Welcome back to Old Man Rambles. Um, I recently learned that America's largest publisher of mass market paperbacks is going out of business. They're closing down productions. What this means is almost no new paperbacks will be made. It's all going to be soft covers, hard covers, and ebooks. And I've always bought paperbacks, or almost always. Grab this over here real quick for a second before I go into my little dissertation. As a kid growing up, I have mentioned that I was poor. Money was tight. We had a roof over our heads. We had food, but there were times when that was basically the limit. Um, my parents did give me a small allowance. A small allowance was not, enough to buy paperbacks. Paperbacks were a luxury item. Not paperbacks, I mean hardcovers. Hardcovers were a luxury item. And I had to make my dollars stretch as far as they could. Dollars, plural, being a rarity. My first allowance was a quarter a week. I think by the time I was 10 or 12, that had gone up to $2 a week. My first allowance was like when I was 5 or 6 years old. My parents gave me a quarter a week. But yeah, by the time I was 10 or 12, it was $2, no, $2 a week, maybe. I don't remember. It's been too long. But at the time, that still wasn't much money. When I was in high school, when I had a job of my own, to give you an example, I do have some hardcover books. This book was published in 1982. No, this was published in 1982, and it was $14.95. This was published in 1984, and it's $2.95. So literally 5 times as much money for a hardcover as for a paperback. When I was younger, there really was no such thing as the soft covers. Where have I got it? Give me something here. Something like this, paperback size books that with a floppy cover. Those are few and far between. It was paperback or hardcover. Hardcovers were for people who were serious collectors and who had the money to spare. I didn't get my first hardcover until I was like 14 years old, and that was a gift. That was a birthday present. My mother joined one of those book of the month clubs where you could buy 12 books for $1. And so, she got me 12 paperback books for $1, and then I had to buy like 3 hardcover books over the next year. It still wound up being cheaper than paperbacks, but most of the hardcovers that I have, aside from the few that have come through recently, are those ones. I've got like 15 or 16 books that were purchased in the 80s. And when I first got them, I was thrilled. A hardcover. Like I said, this was a luxury item. I could never have afforded the full price of these. Even when I was working as a teenager, my salary was still only like $1 and change an hour. So this represented a full day's work for me. It just wasn't economically feasible for me. I could afford to buy 5 of these for the cost of 1 of these. It didn't make any sense to me. And even when I, could afford to buy hardcover books, this was just so much more efficient. This fits in the back pocket of a pair of denim jeans. I carried books with me everywhere I went. I took them on the school bus. When I got out of, when we traveled, when we drove anywhere. If we were driving anywhere that took longer than a half an hour, I took a book with me. The few times I flew in a plane as a kid, as a teenager and stuff, took a book with me. We drove to Jersey to visit family. I took 4 or 5 books with me. It was a 9-hour car ride. Yeah, I took some books with me. Um, I took books with me to work. I would read them during my lunch hour, and paperbacks were easy to carry. So I mean, um, even when I could afford these, it was still much more practical, not just economically, but physically. You know, I can't fit this in my pocket. Carrying this to a workplace was inconvenient. This was so much easier and so much better. And even to this day, I prefer this, in part because I am a collector, and shelf space is limited, storage space is limited. Like I said, once I could afford these, it still became more practical to have these. They may not be as durable, but they didn't necessarily need to be. Um, the hardcover books I still consider them unnecessary. So, what changed? There are multiple factors. This isn't anything you can blame on one individual thing or person or group. It's multifaceted. Part of it is corporate greed. You know, prices have gone up, but it's still modern prices. It's still $9 or $10 for a paperback, and 20 or 30 bucks, for a hardcover. And soft covers are only a few dollars cheaper than the hardcovers. So the publishing companies stopped making paperbacks. It also used to be when a hardcover book came out, the paperback would come out in like 3 or 4 months. As nowadays, the hardcover comes out and they don't put out if they put out a paperback, it doesn't come out for over a year. There are some books I waited 2 years because it's like I have the first 3 books in the series on paperback. I want the next one on paperback too, so that they all can fit nicely on the shelf together. But some of the mentality changed too. Soft covers came out, and they became more popular because they were still nice big books, but they were a few bucks cheap. It was like a mid-range thing. People started buying them more, and then gradually, those soft cover books and the hardcover books took over shelf space. It used to be that bookstores used to want to put as many books on the shelves as possible, but nowadays they just want to put out, a larger book catches the eye. A larger book, because people see it easier, has become more likely to sell. And some of that is the consumer. I mean, not me, because I'm not doing that. But if a consumer comes to the store and they can see, 4 or 5 big books that are easy to see, and then like the small little hardcover things are here, because it's in view easier, because people are more likely to purchase that. It's a, not necessarily a marketing thing, but kind of a marketing thing, and it's human psychology. We're going to buy what is easier for us to see. We're more likely to pick something up what's easier for us to see. And, like I said, when I was a kid, serious collectors bought hardcovers, and people who were poor bought paperbacks. The other switch was ebooks, Kindles, things like that. People who were buying the cheaper versions started buying ebooks instead of paperbacks. So there's been less demand, both because people are now more willing to buy the large, collectors are more willing to spend more money to buy the larger books, the soft covers and hardcovers. And the casual readers, instead of buying paperbacks, are just downloading it on their phone or their tablet, because they can carry their entire library with them. And unless you're a serious collector, people don't mind deleting them off their phones or their tablets. When I was younger, most people who were casual readers would just buy the paperbacks and then give them to the library or give them to a friend. A lot of my friends would just share books around. There are a lot of books that I read as a teenager that I never purchased because a friend lent them to me. I read their entire series of. I went through my friends' bookshelves and said, "Hey, can I borrow that for a week?" And then we switch books around. You can't do that with an ebook, or you can't do that with a book you download. That's strictly forbidden, and that's one of the reasons I hate them. for the same reason I hate Apple Music, is that you're not buying a copy of the book, you're buying the permission to use it for yourself and yourself alone. Yeah, I could read someone else's Kindle, but I couldn't download it from their Kindle onto mine. I've gone over that before. I don't like it. I don't like the transitional ownership, the temporary transitional ownership of a piece of media that I paid for. I want the physical copy, and I always will. But I still have a large list of books I want, and I just can't seem to get them in paperback anymore. Even current books are hard for me to find. And now with the closing of America's largest publisher of mass paperbacks, that's going to get even harder. And it's the same problem with me trying to find CDs too. Serious collectors either buy vinyl or they just download tons of stuff. But it's come to the point that I may have to stop buying books. I mean, yes, I can buy the soft covers and hardcovers, but I am a collector. This bookshelf is full. I could maybe move some of the shelves up and condense them a little bit and maybe get another 50 or 60 books in here. But after that, this bookshelf is full. I've got a small little wall space about this big over there. I could maybe put a tall shelf on and fit a couple, maybe bring one tote in from the shed and put another tote's worth of books in here. But that's really it. I mean, there's not really, unless my wife will start letting me put bookshelves all over the house, there's just not that much wall space that's available. You know, unless I can, you know, if I can swing some remodeling, you know, tear that closet out and replace the whole wall with bookshelves, which I would love to do, by the way. But other things are more important. Yeah, there are other things that be taking up some finances for the foreseeable future, unless I manage to squeeze some money out of somewhere, which I don't know. You never know. No one's going to talk to, you know. I don't foresee in the future. Anyway, it's a whole other story. I'm rambling on, going on little side journeys here that don't need to be gone on. But yeah, I may have to stop buying books. Good hunting.